Hey everybody. I just finished another Goosebumps book in the original series. This is Deep Trouble 2. This is a buddy read with a good friend of mine, and yeah. Quick story about this book. I remember as a kid, I remember seeing this picture floating around on eBay. So, fun story about me. I didn't have internet as a kid. I actually didn't have it as an adult up until recently. Um, yeah, and I remember a good friend of mine would go on eBay and we would look up pictures of Goosebump books and we'd try to memorize them, like what they look like, or at least I did. And I remember this one being up there, and I remember seeing this one for like 1 cent on eBay. And I remember wanting to get, or not really caring about this book too much. I remember the cover not being very impressive. I thought it was kind of goofy looking. And yeah. Um, I remember reading this book like in the back seat of my dad's car or whatever, and I remember loving this book as a kid, or liking it strongly as a kid. And I remember liking this better than the first Deep Trouble. Boy, how was I wrong? This book uh, wasn't great. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't my favorite thing either. Um, the story itself is about Billy, Sheena, and Dr. D. They are on another summer vacation on the Cassandra, and Billy Deep is pretending to be this underwater explorer thing, and he's trying to tickle this monster to escape it, and it turns out it's just Sheena. She calls him a moron. He climbs on the boat, and he says, he wants to get her back for being, I guess, mean, and he grabs this pillow, and he turns it sideways. He says he's going to be a shark. So he jumps in the water, tries to scare Sheena. Sheena starts screaming, there's a shark, like she's really scared, but it turns out there's actually a gigantic shark. And this is where we see our first giant fish monster thing. I remember as a kid, I remember this book being something about plankton, giant fish, and I remember them spending a lot of time in a lab, but apparently that doesn't happen. Not a lot anyway. So the giant shark tries to attack. They climb on the boat. It hits the side of the boat. Dr. D comes out to figure out, what's going on? Why is this boat rocking, and all this stuff. And the kids say this giant shark hit, and they said it was the size of a whale. And Dr. D, says that sharks don't get that big, apparently. I don't know anything about sharks. I don't know anything about the seawater, anything like that. But yeah, he tells the kids to come down to the lab. He wants to show them something that he found. And there's this giant fish, and he can't figure out the scales of it, like what kind of scale pattern or whatever. So Billy starts flipping through this book, and inside this book, there is a bunch of like small fish or whatever. And the small fish, basically Dr. D says, it's kind of a waste of time to look through there. It's not going to be in there. Turns out it is. There's a minnow, and it matches the description of the fish or whatever. And he says that's what it is. And, he's like, that's impossible. How is these fish this big? Billy notices there's these little jars of just like food or something. And he asks Dr. D about it. He says it's plankton, it's healthy for your fish to eat them. They eat this, and he gets them from exploring or whatever. He tells Billy to go feed his goldfish and a snail the plankton. So he goes to his room, his cabin, and he sees this head floating in the water. And it turns out it's just a doll head that Sheena put in there to kind of scare Billy. He gets mad about that or whatever. And the next scene, they're in the water, and Sheena gets almost eaten by this giant jellyfish. And Billy saves her after another giant jellyfish tries to attack her. They go back on the boat, and they start hearing this thumping noise. And it turns out that Billy's goldfish that Sheena moved, when she put the doll head in there, is huge. And he's flopping around on the boat, making the boat rock. And they get the fish out, throw them overboard. They go back down to the lab, and they start hearing footsteps above their cabin. There's also a giant snail. I should throw that in there too. There's a lot of giant things in this book that I'm probably not going to go over a single one. There's giant crabs, giant snails, giant seagulls, whatever. And they hear these footsteps. They climb upstairs, and they run into Dr. Ritter and his two assistants, which I know one's name is Mel. I don't remember the other one's name. And it turns out that, Dr. Ritter asked them first if they seen anything kind of crazy on this boat. They say no, they haven't seen anything, crazy or anything like that. But Billy speaks up and says, yeah, we've seen all kind of crazy stuff, And his, Dr. D tells him, to be quiet, don't, don't, tell him. Turns out that Dr. Ritter is the one that created these giant fish to end world hunger. And he uses this plankton, like he injected the plankton with something or whatever, and it turns the fish giant. That's basically what happens. After this, these giant seagulls attack the group of bad guys or whatever, and they escape. And they end up on this island, and yeah, that's basically where I'm going to leave this book, because I've already given away too much. I don't think any of that was a spoiler, though, because it was, I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Deep Trouble 2 wasn't a great one, in my opinion. I struggled on the rating of this. I wanted to give it like a 2 out of 5 stars, because I didn't have a lot of fun with it. But the giant things, I thought more about it, and they are kind of scary. Like, I don't like fish or anything like that. They're pretty gross. And yeah, they freak me out a little bit. I'll be honest with you. If I'm fishing, somebody else is going to unhook the line for me. Yeah, at least that was how I was when I was a kid. I haven't been fishing in years, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, Deep Trouble 2 wasn't a great book. It was a weaker one in my opinion, but I did like the villain. I did like Dr. Ritter, and I thought he was pretty fascinating, and I wish we learned more about him. And I'd be lying if I said that if I got attacked by a giant seagull, a giant fish, a giant snail, I'd be scared. But most of this book's just giant things randomly attacking with no really rhyme or reason. Yeah. I give Deep Trouble 2 a 3 out of 5 stars. I think that's fair. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, but I think it was okay. But yeah, that's it for me, guys. Thank you. Please let me know in the comments, what did you think about Deep Trouble 2? Also, this is my reprint edition. This is Deep Trouble 2, the Horrorland reprint. I think I have another reprint of this book somewhere, but it's really, really beat up. But yeah, this is actually the one I had since I was a kid, and it's in really good condition. I've noticed that I took care of my books as a kid as I got a little older. But yeah, Deep Trouble 2, 3 out of 5 stars for me. I do think this is probably the weakest reread of the original series that I've read so far. I didn't really love Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, so it's kind of between this and that, and I think I like Scarecrow Walks at Midnight slightly better than this. I'll have to do some more thinking, but yeah, Deep Trouble 2, 3 out of 5 stars for me. Please let me know in the comments below, what did you think about this book. Thank you. Bye-bye.